Let me set the record straight on something right now when it comes to Shedeur Sanders. That's coming up on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. I see the comments, I see them, and it's time for me to set the record straight on Shedeur Sanders on this very podcast. Plus, Kevin Stefanski is facing his biggest test as a head coach this season with two rookie quarterbacks. And speaking of Stefanski, what are his player success stories? We'll talk about all those things and more coming up. I do want to thank you for being an everydayer at the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends. And it's totally free to you. Just make sure you hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you listen to your podcast, and of course the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. You can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comment section. This is your team, so be part of the conversation every single day. And I need to set the record straight on something when it comes to Shedeur Sanders. Like, I don't know where this idea came from people in the comment sections, people, interacting with the podcast, that for some reason I'm like, I feel like people think I'm a Shedeur Sanders hater because I'm even the least bit critical of things that he has to improve on. I want to be very, very clear here. Just because I talk about things that he maybe needs to improve on in his game, or that he doesn't have, or I used in an earlier episode this week, like he doesn't have an elite trait. I think people are confusing traits with skills. His ability to be accurate as a passer and read defenses, that is a skill. That is something it took to develop. Cam Ward, for example, has an elite trait in his arm. That is something that he just inherently has attached to his body that other people can't necessarily just develop. Like, that's not something you develop over time. He has a very strong arm. It's a gift. Like, so I think people are confusing that when I say he doesn't have an elite trait, but he can throw super accurately. Like, that's not a knock on him. It's just a fact. It is a statement of fact. And people are trying to throw back in my face that I'm saying he doesn't have an elite trait, and then I'm talking about him being super accurate. There's a difference. That is a skill. That is something he's developed over time, and that is something that he's really good at. And I want to be super, super clear here again. He has all the tools to be successful at this level. I believe that in my heart of hearts. If you've listened to this podcast since I took over in December, if you've listened to this podcast throughout the pre-draft process, and now with Shedeur Sanders actually having or being a member of the Cleveland Browns, I have raved about the fact that I think he's a perfect fit for Kevin Stefanski's offense. I have raved about the fact that I think he has all the things he needs to be successful at the next level, how I think that him going in the 5th round was a snub, and that teams were trying to prove a point here and make him kind of earn it because he didn't have a great pre-draft process in terms of the interviews and maybe not working out as much as teams would have liked to see. Whatever the reasons may be, I do think that him going in the 5th round wasn't an accurate depiction of the skill level that he brings to the table. I think I've talked about that. I have highlighted the fact that every draft expert out there, and even teams' own scouts that have been quoted anonymously or whatever you want to call it, have all said that they believed he was at least a day 2 guy. And so the fact that he goes day 3 in the 5th round was a stunner for that reason. Clearly, the interview process hurt his stock, and that was something that I didn't necessarily account for. But I see a guy that, like these scouts all anticipated or projected, should have gone earlier in the draft than he did. He didn't, so now he has to go out and he has to earn his stripes in that way. I think he has the ability, and that's the thing. I have been saying, I think he has the ability to go out and earn this starting job at some point. I think my read on the situation right now is that it's probably going to be a veteran who starts the season, and at some point they'll pave the way for Dillon Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders or both to start in later in the year and see what they can do. But like in watching the day of practice I saw, like here's the other thing. He hasn't thrown a pass yet in a truly competitive football setting that we've been able to see. And that's the other thing that we need to remember here is can we just be patient? It's if I'm sitting here saying there's things he's going to have to do, every player comes into the league. Shedeur Sanders is not a perfect prospect by any stretch. That doesn't mean he can't be successful. That doesn't mean I don't think he's going to be successful. I think he has a legitimate chance of becoming the Browns starting quarterback. I do. I've said that. But just because I say he, like, every player that enters the NFL pretty much has things they have to improve on. Myles Garrett was as close to a perfect prospect when he came out as anybody's ever been. And even he, I think at that time, I can remember, talked about like developing other pass rush moves and learning different nuances of the position. There's just parts of the game that are different at this level that you learn and you develop. And that's part of his process now. And you know, if you want to throw the fact that he's a 5th-round pick out the window because you don't think he should have been that, I can wrap my head around that. I agree. But I'm not sitting here like ripping the guy and acting like he can't be good. And when I had a conversation earlier in the week about like, you know, Scott McLaughlin mentioning teams are going to live to regret not drafting Shedeur Sanders, my overarching point I think was missed, where I think that I think that he has a chance to go out and prove to a lot of teams wrong and make them sort of eat crow for not taking him. I think that's 100% true. If he ends up where I think he's going to end up, or where I think he really can end up, which is, you know, a top 10 to 15 quarterback in this sport, there will be plenty of teams who are sitting there like, man, like we could have used that guy. I don't think it'll be everybody, because a lot of teams are already set at the quarterback position and they don't care. I think other teams will. The other thing you have to remember is like all these GMs, all these organizations, all these owners, they're all pretty egotistical people. Like, at the end of the day, they're all pretty narcissistic in their own right. Like, they believe their process is the best process. And so teams that passed on him will probably just keep it moving and be like, well, we think there's better prospects out there to come in years ahead, and so we don't necessarily regret not taking him. I just think that's the way that these teams think. But me saying those things out loud doesn't mean that I don't think he has a chance to really prove to the NFL that they made a mistake in not taking him, and maybe taking other quarterbacks before him or passing on him as long as they did. And he, I think right now, is saying all the right things. He's going out and saying, it's not about proving other teams wrong, it's about proving myself right. He believes he can do this. I believe he can do this. I literally love Shedeur Sanders on this football team, and I think he has a chance to earn his place. I'm curious to see what the rep share looks like, because that's a big part of this, right? If they think they clearly liked Dillon Gabriel more because they took him earlier. If they like that's just a fact. That is just a statement of fact. I'm not saying I like Dillon Gabriel more, but they did. And so how they divvy up these reps, who's going to get more of them, who's going to get less of them, what's that all going to look like? And that's a conversation I want to have in terms of the developmental piece of this when it comes to Kevin Stefanski developing young quarterbacks for the first time. But there, like this notion that I don't think that like I'm adding to the media hate to Shedeur Sanders, I think is nonsense. And I have to set the record straight on this podcast, because I believe truly that Shedeur is going to make it at this level, and I think he has a legitimate chance of being the Browns starting quarterback if they give him the right opportunities and they have the right people in place to help him take his game to that next level, develop correctly, because there is a developmental piece of this. Like, there's been plenty of prospects who we thought were sure things in the NFL, and I don't think Shedeur is even, I'm not going to sit here and tell you Shedeur is a sure thing, because sure things do go in the first round, and he didn't. I'm not saying he can't be great, but like there's flaws to a lot of these prospects coming, like, and even in this class alone, there was very few prospects that you were like, this guy's a blue chipper. There was only a few guys that we call blue chip prospects in this draft in general. So listen, there's a developmental piece that has to happen here. That's going to come with him and again, these football settings, practices, preseason, training camp, all those things, as he participates in those more and more, we'll start to learn more about where he's at, how ready he is to take on the challenge of the NFL. I think he has what he needs to be successful. I've never not said that. I think he has the chance to be a top 10 to 15 quarterback in this league. Maybe he'll even exceed those expectations that I sort of have for him. But the idea that we need to like declare him anything right now, I think is disingenuous, because there's still more that has to come here. Like, sitting here and being, I think it's a high, I understand it's a highly controversial topic right now, because people feel like he was snubbed by the NFL, rightfully so, and should have gone earlier. And I get all those things. But to sit here and be like, he's for sure going to be this or he's for sure going to be that, like, this is what I believe he's going to be. And you can believe what you want to believe. But the idea that like we know anything definitively right now, and that means I can't say that there's things he has to get better at, is ridiculous. I think of the two, here's where I will end this conversation. I think of the two, at least right now, I think of the two rookie quarterbacks the Browns took, Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel. Dillon Gabriel has certain things that I think clearly the Browns valued and liked He has certain things that impress me. He has a strong arm. I do worry about his height. I don't know that he's going to be able to make it at this league or in this league. There's some concerns there. Maybe he proves this is what sports is all about, right? Guys proving us analysts and talking heads or whatever you want to call us wrong. So maybe Dillon Gabriel can prove something. I think Shedeur looked more the part. He looked like an NFL level quarterback who can scan a defense, make the throws. The notion that he doesn't have a strong arm, so he can't make the throws, I think is I've talked about that a lot. How I don't agree with that. Like, I think he's proven on his tape that he can make those throws. He doesn't have to have the strong arm to do that. The things he does do well are things that can make him a successful quarterback in the NFL. 100% true, and I've never disputed that. But to act like these guys, both of them, don't have steps they have to take, and that there's a developmental piece of this and coaching that comes into play. And situation, frankly, like they have to be put in the right situation at the right time to be successful as well. Like, all those things matter, and we just need to see more before I can definitively say he's going to be this or he's going to be that. And so I just want to clear the air on this, because I don't know where this notion came from one episode this week that I'm somehow some Shedeur Sanders hater feeding into the narratives that he's just not going to be good. I've always said I thought he's going to be great. I've always said I thought he was worthy of being a first-round pick at some point. I don't know if I wanted. As the process went on, I backed off from the thought that he should be number 2 overall, but I still felt like he should be a first-round pick. If the Browns were to trade back in and get him, I would have been okay with that. And I think his ability is there. I think he can become a top 10 to 15 quarterback in this sport. Just be sort of like this steady, consistent player that maybe doesn't have that elite trait, but does a lot of things really, really well. And can turn that and parlay like Brock Purdy. Does Brock Purdy have an elite trait? Not really, but he does a lot of things really, really well. And San Francisco just paid him a bunch of money to be their franchise quarterback for. Like, why can't he become that guy? He can. I've always said that. So I just want to clear the air on this, because I'm going to be critical at times of Shedeur, and as he goes through his process and he learns the nuances of the NFL, and as he just frankly develops, like, and admitting that he has some things to improve on doesn't mean I'm a hater. And I just need to clear the air on that. I'm sorry. He hasn't thrown a meaningful pass against like true competition, because the only thing we've seen so far has been rookie minicamp, and that was a bunch of guys who were undrafted free agents largely that he was throwing against. Like, let's give it some time here to marinate and keep seeing how he progresses. And I think he's going to progress pretty well and have a shot at winning this starting job. Maybe not right away, but at some point this season. And that's what's most important here. It's not about the right now. It's about what does this thing look like in August and who comes out on top. Speaking of the developmental process for Shedeur and Dillon Gabriel, frankly, Kevin Stefanski faces his biggest challenge yet as a head coach. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. I can tell you that as I've looked for different opportunities throughout my career, LinkedIn has always come in handy with the connections that I need or that I wasn't even expecting, reaching out to me about potential opportunities. Post Your Job is LinkedIn's new feature to help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. Here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helped them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions may apply. All right, so in the vein of talking about Shedeur Sanders' development and Dillon Gabriel's development, I think that Kevin Stefanski is facing his biggest challenge yet as head coach of the Cleveland Browns, frankly. And it all centers around the idea that this is the first time that he is getting like a ball of clay, these two young rookie quarterbacks, and he needs to develop them. And I wonder where I wonder where your thoughts are on Kevin Stefanski as a coach who can develop quarterbacks. Because I think he came in with a lot of buzz and fanfare around the idea that, yes, he's this great quarterback, this great offensive mind, and quarterbacks naturally will develop under him, because you had some evidence of like Kirk Cousins becoming a better quarterback under Kevin Stefanski's tutelage. But I also get the sense that there aren't a lot of people right now who trust Kevin Stefanski to do much of anything in this town. I know there's plenty of people who wanted his head on a spike at the end of the season and thought that he should have been fired. And I think because of that, like, they don't necessarily trust that he can do this part of it, develop players. And I can't necessarily push back on that fully. Any criticism of that nature is fair, because we just frankly haven't seen him do it yet. Stefanski's reputation with quarterbacks is basically baked in making Jacoby Brissett look like a steady, reliable NFL quarterback for the stretch of games that he played when Deshaun Watson was suspended. Baker, early in his career, getting like producing the best results, the best seasons of his career as a quarterback under Stefanski. That there was that for a while, but now Baker's gone on to be even better after Stefanski. And then Joe Flacco basically reviving his career under Stefanski is the third sort of pillar of what his production is, or what his development is in terms of quarterbacks, is sort of propped up by. And a lot of that also is like Joe Flacco was already a successful quarterback in the NFL, right? Like, had won a Super Bowl, obviously a veteran at this point, like knows what he's doing. It was just a perfect fit in terms of the system. And so he thrived in it. But other than that, it's like Deshaun Watson, that experience has been a disaster. And he's never really seemed to take in, he was supposed to be coming here because he likes Stefanski's offense. At least that's what he said. And he liked what Stefanski did as a play caller. And then they had to completely change the offense for him. And it was one of the worst some of the worst offensive football we've ever seen. So there's that factor here with Deshaun. There's also the fact that, like, we've just never really seen him develop young quarterbacks. You had DTR in the building. Maybe he was never going to become anything, but like, he never really amounted to much. Other young quarterbacks that they've maybe had in spurts or here or there, like, have never really done much. He always seems to like get more out of average quarterbacks than most, but we've never seen him actually fully develop a quarterback into something, or help a quarterback like reach a new level that we hadn't necessarily seen before. It's always just been like, okay, Jacoby Brissett looks like he doesn't make the big mistakes, or he looks like viable here, but he's not like some elite quarterback now. And so this is something we've just frankly never seen him do in Cleveland. And so I think it's fair to have questions about his ability. I will say, I think Stefanski can do it. I still operate from this place of, I believe Kevin Stefanski is one of the better offensive minds in football, that his system works, and that they are, if he gets the right quarterback out there, and the right quarterback that's a rookie that he's trying to develop, this thing can function properly. Like, I think we're all giving some credit, at least, to Kyle Shanahan, that he's developed Brock Purdy into the quarterback that he is. Whether you want to say it's like a system thing, sometimes the system can't make a quarterback, and that's the sort of the premise of where Kevin Stefanski, I think, operates too, is if he gets the right quarterback, if he identifies a guy, young or old, that can function in the system, like, yeah, he can develop them, absolutely. And so I think he can still do that. And I'm curious to see how he handles this for the first time. But obviously we don't have much to go off of to prove it at this point. And so for whatever reason, they loved Dillon Gabriel. In their evaluation process, it brought them to a point where they felt Dillon Gabriel was worth a third-round pick. Dillon Gabriel was worth a top 100 pick at that. And so they pulled the trigger. And they brought this guy in as the guy that they were sort of like, Kevin Stefanski was grinning talking about Dillon Gabriel and the process of evaluating him and meeting with him and how much they liked him. They feel he's going to fit this offense. They feel he's going to do the things they want him to do. They love him for whatever reason. We can sit back and say there's the questions there. They think he's going to be a good quarterback. They also have Shedeur now, as we talked about. Like, what is he is the next phase for Shedeur, while I think he has all the things to be successful, is what does it look like when he gets with a coach who works on some of the things he has to improve on and then helps him take his game to that next level and fits him into the scheme. I think he's a good scheme fit, but will it work? Will the coaching take hold and allow him to continue to get better as a player at this level and learn the game at this level so they can both become better players? That's the part of this that we're talking about. And so that's the thing Kevin Stefanski still has to prove. And frankly, like, his job security might depend on it, because, it always is going to depend on quarterbacks. But developing players is at the root of what coaches are trying to do. And if Stefanski's bread and butter is I'm this great offensive mind and quarterbacks can become something special under me, well, we haven't seen it yet. And that's why I think this is his biggest challenge, because if he can't develop a quarterback, if he can't make one of these guys even seem viable or steady or strong as like under center and they when they take the field eventually, then it just feels like to me we're like this team could be treading water with a coach that you have some doubts about in terms of that in that regard. Like, this is the thing he hasn't proven yet, and the future of the franchise depends on finding and identifying a quarterback that can be your franchise guy, be your everyday guy. Can Stefanski get that done? Can he do that? Is the challenge he faces this year with two guys for the first time. He's never been asked to do this. He has never been asked to truly develop a quarterback. Now he's being asked to do it. And so, will he be able to is the big question. I think he can. But, man, there's not a lot of evidence of that. And I understand if people have doubts. And so this year for him is about that first and foremost. Forget like the wins and losses. Whatever their record's going to be, their record's going to be. Yes, he can't lose the locker room. Like, the messaging still has to get through. But you heard Joel Bitonio like talking on the radio recently about the idea that like they just want the best player to start. Like, these guys are going to know. These guys are going to see it. And if they're seeing, like, you can't BS them on like, well, this guy's been the best if a different guy's been the best, which is why this this quarterback competition is going to be so fascinating. And like, if those rookies are taking strides and seize those jobs, you got to start one of them. But then it becomes about like, okay, does it translate on the field in meaningful games? And those are the things that Kevin Stefanski kind of has to prove this year. I like record-wise, yes, of course. Like, anytime you have a bad season, you're on the chopping block. But if he at least shows that he has helped these quarterbacks develop slightly in year one and has proof and evidence that he can tangibly show everybody that, like, yes, these guys are developing already. We saw them get better. We've seen what they can do on the field. Whether it's Gabriel, whether it's Shedeur, who maybe seizes that opportunity better or more, whatever, like, fine. But him proving that, I think, is the most important part of this season for him. Because if he can't develop quarterbacks, then this team might be in trouble whether they think one of these guys is the guy or they're going to go draft another quarterback next year who they think is the guy. They need somebody in here who can definitively do that. And so that's what this year is about for Kevin Stefanski, proving that developing quarterbacks is something that he is capable of, because we just haven't seen it yet. Speaking of Stefanski, and this goes into a deeper conversation here about whether or not he has any player success stories. There's one name that comes to mind for me. I'll share it with you coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. So after talking about whether or not Kevin Stefanski can develop quarterbacks and sort of mapping out this show, this got me thinking even deeper just about, in general, Kevin Stefanski's ability to develop players. And this coach, and frankly, like it extends beyond him. Him and his coaching staff as a whole developing players, and whether or not we can identify any like true success stories from a player development standpoint under Kevin Stefanski since he's been here in Cleveland. I think this is an interesting topic. There's one name that comes to mind for me of somebody who I think is a true Kevin Stefanski player success story, and that's David Njoku. Now listen, the pushback on this could be, well, he was a first-round pick, so it's like you at some point you thought he was going to get there anyway. But if you go back and look at, David Njoku early on in his career, for being a first-round pick, there was a lot of questions about like if he was ever going to meet the potential that some of these teams saw in him. Like year 2, he had 639 yards, and it looked like he was taking a step. Then he was injured throughout 2019 and only played 4 games. And then 2020, he only had the 213 yards. The first year was Kevin Stefanski. And we know about their very touch-and-go relationship early on in this when this regime took over. Him and Kevin Stefanski didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things. And they've ironed those things out, and it helped produce in 2023 his best season as a Pro Bowler. 882 yards on 81 receptions, the most targets he's ever had, the most receptions he's ever had, plus 6 touchdowns, the most touchdowns he's ever had. Like, he finally got to a point where he was producing at this high level, and I think Kevin Stefanski is a big part of that. I also think, like, under Stefanski, Njoku has developed into one of the best blocking tight ends in football, hands down. No questions asked. And so, from that viewpoint, I do feel like David Njoku is maybe the one success story at least we can point to and say, well, he helped develop this guy. This is one guy, especially on the offensive side of the ball, which is his bread and butter, as we know, that he sort of turned into this elite player, or top tier player in the game, a top 10 player in the game at the very least. Like I think that's the one that I think about. But in terms of others, like I don't know that there's a lot of other players you can point to and say, well, he helped develop that guy. Like Cedric Tillman could be one if we get to that point, which I do want to come back to the receiver thing here in a second, because this regime just has failed miserably at developing wide receiver talent, as we know. Like I'm thinking along the offensive line, like DeJuan Jones could maybe be on that right track if he can stay healthy, maybe. But like they haven't done it a lot with offensive linemen. Most of this group's been a veteran group. I think Andrew Berry had hit on finding a number of linemen throughout his time here in Cleveland. He like Ethan Posick has been a pretty solid center. I think Nick Harris had some potential, and then injuries kind of caught up with him. But like skill position wise, here's the thing. Kevin Stefanski stepped into a situation where they were pretty set at a lot of the most important positions on the field. Running back, you had Nick Chubb. There wasn't a lot of development that needed to happen there. He was already elite. Myles Garrett, clearly not something that needed to be developed there. Like he was already elite. Denzel Ward, same thing. A lot of your cornerstone players for this team were already here from the previous regime, the John Dorsey regime, and so you didn't necessarily have to develop a lot of guys. It was just kind of like filling in the cracks and not driving the train off the tracks. Well, now you're at a different phase. Now you are responsible for turning this franchise around, and that is in a little bit of a rebuild. And so player development is huge. Coaches are judged. Well, coaches are judged by a lot of things. Yes, Kevin Stefanski gets called out every year for, is he a good player? Is he a good play caller? Is he not a good play caller? And so I know there's a lot of things that you're judging when it comes to a coach, but player development is a big one. Think about like Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. He forever has in his cap that he like that feather's in his cap that he developed. He drafted Patrick Mahomes, saw the vision, turned him into the best quarterback in the NFL right now, and who could maybe finish as the best of all time. Like we don't know, that story is still being written, but like that is something that he can forever say. Who can Kevin Stefanski say that about right now? We don't have an answer. Now it's if he develops one of these quarterbacks, of course that changes. But I don't know if there's a lot of that right now with Stefanski or this regime as a whole in terms of like players that they've turned into great players. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah could have been maybe in that conversation. Granted, he was a second-round pick with a lot of talent, but he was a Pro Bowler. Like, so there's some small stories, but I don't know that we've seen them like resoundingly make somebody great, and that we've seen the player development at a number of spots. And so, and to be clear, like that doesn't just end with Stefanski, but it is his staff. Like the bigger picture part of this is that like getting this is who, like the fact that this organization has failed to develop receivers, for example, is a major issue. And I know that a lot of times they're taking these guys third round and beyond, and so what are those players really going to become is a fair question to ask. But every team finds some level of success stories, it feels like, with receivers and turns them into something. A reliable weapon that's like your third or fourth guy even, and the Browns have just never been able to do that. Maybe just Cedric Tillman's the anomaly here in Cleveland, and they finally figured it out. But they haven't been able to develop receivers. They haven't been able to develop a number of positions. And like I said, it's not necessarily just on Kevin Stefanski, but it is his staff. And so collectively, I think player development has been a problem on this team. And that's, again, why this year is so important. You have 7 rookies that this team just drafted. Some of them are at the same position, so they're going to be sort of like splitting reps, or maybe won't play right away in terms of the quarterbacks with this team now. But a lot of these guys are going to be contributing regularly. Quinshon Judkins is going to be your feature back. We know that. And Sampson's going to play, likely as the guy sort of spelling him, if you will. Mason Graham is going to start immediately. Carson Swessinger is going to start immediately. Who am I missing? Harold Fannin is going to see a lot of time because they're going to go back to running a lot of 12 personnel. And he's going to be worked in quite a bit with this offense and this team. Like, are you going to develop these guys? And someone like Harold Fannin is a great example because at 20, there's so much room for him to grow and develop. He's not your characteristic tight end build. So what can he sort of bring to the table? What can he do? What can Kevin Stefanski unlock with him? And like I said, the one success story we can point to is David Njoku. So maybe that's his bread and butter is, hey, I can develop tight end prospects. And maybe we'll see that with him. But as a whole, yes, the quarterbacks, him developing the quarterbacks is the biggest challenge he faces this year, and just the biggest challenge I think he's faced since he's been with the Cleveland Browns and taken over this organization. But him and his staff developing this roster moving forward is going to tell the story of the 2025, 2026, 2027 Browns potentially as well. Because if they continue to fall short of finding players and developing them, then this thing is dead upon arrival anyway. And this regime they're going to have to take, like the Haslam's are going to have to take a good hard look at whether or not they trust this group to move forward with them and build this team in the right direction, because they're now at a transitional phase. There's like Nick Chubb of 2020 ain't walking through that door anymore. Like, they're not even going to bring him back after another gruesome knee injury. Like, this is the time where, like, your roster, either as you turn things over and things change and you're in a little bit of a rebuild, this is where you start to find out, like, who the good coaches and good staffs are and who aren't. And if you can't, this has always been the thing the Browns have struggled with, frankly. Like, it's one thing to have a bunch of players here and take them and win. It's another to develop those players. And so if he can't help these players reach their full potential, if his staff can't help these players reach their full potential, when you got 7 rookies, a number of them, at least 5 of them, going to contribute almost immediately, pretty regularly as well, and a number of them will be starters, then he may not be the coach destined to turn this franchise around. He may not be the coach to march on into this future and whatever that looks like. And it's whatever that looks like, it's a pivotal point in the Browns, for the Browns organization, and they need somebody who can definitely do that. So whether it's developing the quarterbacks, which again, biggest challenge I think Stefanski faces, or looking back and trying to find those success stories and pinpointing, like, are there more of those coming for this staff under Stefanski? That's a huge question that needs answered here in 2025 for the Cleveland Browns, if the future is going to be as bright as people hope it's going to be with this franchise. Another episode down with you, Dog Pound. Thank you for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. More to come this week, including discussing more in relation to the quarterback room and how this thing could sort itself out, and and speaking of, like, job security for Kevin Stefanski, what sort of slow start, if there is a slow start, is survivable for both him and Andrew Berry in that regard. So make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you make Locked On Browns your first listen every day. We're also going to do some Fan Friday questions tomorrow, so send me your questions in the comment section here at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel or on Twitter at @Spencito_. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting, or you can keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being an everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again soon, Cleveland. See ya.